She stood alone. Congresswoman Jeanette Rankin, the first woman elected to the United States Congress, was the sole vote against the United States entering World War I. How was it that the United States became embroiled in the Great War? Let's learn about it. The roots of World War I. Although there were many positive changes taking place inside the United States during the progressive age of the early 1900s, trouble brewing in Europe was about to turn America's attention toward conflict. Problems in Europe had been growing for years, it seemed. Let's look at the long-term causes of the Great War. First, feelings of nationalism had been sweeping throughout Europe in the years leading up to war. Nationalism is an extreme pride in one's own country or nationality. These feelings of nationalism led to nations being far more concerned with their own interests than with those of all of Europe. Additionally, many ethnic groups within nations wanted to establish their own independence. Related to these feelings of nationalism was the desire of many of these countries to protect their own self-interests. Many nations adopted a policy of militarism. Militarism is the process by which one nation builds up its own military forces for the purpose of intimidating other countries and flexing its own military might. Among the nations practicing militarism in the early 1900s were Germany, Austria-Hungary, Russia, Great Britain, and France. European nations also began to form alliances. An alliance is an agreement between countries to help each other in the event that one of the countries is attacked. If one nation in an alliance is attacked, then the other nations in the alliance would also consider themselves attacked. Because of this alliance system, if one nation of Europe were attacked, this meant that other nations would be drawn into the conflict. Europe seemed to be sitting on a powder keg. It would not take much of a spark to set off the storm of war. The spark that ignited the Great War came on June 28, 1914. The heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist during his visit to the province of Bosnia. Bosnia actually belonged to Serbia and not Austria-Hungary. The people of Austria-Hungary immediately began to blame Serbia for plotting this assassination. Russia, allied with Serbia, announced that it would intervene in this brewing conflict. Russia began mobilization, preparing their troops for war. Because Germany was allied with Austria-Hungary, they jumped into this posturing for war. Germany's leader was Kaiser Wilhelm II. He was known for his militaristic style. Germany was viewed by much of Europe as a threat. By August of 1914, Europe was on the verge of an all-out war. Because of the pre-formed alliances, Europe had become divided. Great Britain, France, and Russia formed an alliance called the Triple Entente. We know them as the Allies. The alliance of Germany and Austria-Hungary evolved. They were known as the Central Powers. As Europe seemed to be falling apart, President Wilson of the United States was determined to keep our nation out of Europe's war. In August of 1914, President Wilson officially announced the United States policy of neutrality. Wilson did not believe that the war in Europe was any concern to us. He felt that we should remain isolated and stay out of world affairs. This policy is known as isolationism. As a matter of fact, when Wilson ran for re-election as president, his campaign slogan was, "He kept us out of war." Even though Wilson pursued a course of neutrality, other factors eventually led us to join the war in Europe. In the years leading up to the war, U.S. bankers had loaned large amounts of money to Great Britain. Therefore, many people had a financial interest in the Allies winning the war. Additionally, most images of the war that reached the United States came from Great Britain. American citizens began to see the Central Powers of Germany and Austria-Hungary as the aggressors. Two events really turned America's opinion toward joining the Great War in Europe. First, Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare angered many Americans. One of Germany's most feared weapons was its underwater boats called U-boats. Germany had warned all nations that any ship entering or leaving British ports would be attacked by their U-boat submarines. Unknown to passengers, the United States had begun shipping military supplies to Great Britain aboard commercial cruise liners. One of these British liners, the Lusitania, was attacked by German U-boat torpedoes in 1915. 1,200 people died, including 128 U.S. citizens. Anti-German feeling swept across America. Although in its Sussex Pledge, Germany promised not to attack any more passenger ships, it resumed attacks on merchant ships and commercial ships in 1917. The United States was edging closer to war. Although the United States continued its efforts to stay out of war, it was a telegram intercepted by British intelligence that caused public opinion to favor getting involved in the fight. In 1917, British officials intercepted a telegram from the German Foreign Minister, Arthur Zimmermann. The telegram was sent to the German embassy in Mexico. In the telegram, Zimmermann told embassy officials to ask Mexico to attack the United States if it declared war on Germany. In return, Germany promised to help Mexico win back the land that the U.S. had acquired as a result of the Mexican War. This, the Zimmermann telegram, infuriated Americans. President Wilson decided we could no longer remain neutral. In March of 1917, Wilson made a case for going to war against the Central Powers. He said that the world must be made safe for democracy. By this, he meant that the people of the United States must see this fight as a fight between good and evil, a fight between democracy and tyranny. In April of 1917, Congress passed a war resolution and officially entered the Great War. Incidentally, only one member of Congress voted against the declaration of war, Jeannette Rankin. Rankin had become the first woman ever to serve in the United States Congress. She stood alone. Soon, U.S. troops would arrive on European soil.